on with their organization to honor Charlie Kirk. So, of course, we have our esteemed guest here to talk about that. So, I just want to jump right in, and I'll ask first, Dr. Wilmer Leon, what do you think was Charlie Kirk's Christian message and appeal? Why was he so appealing to some people?
Charlie Kirk didn't have a Christian message. Charlie Kirk uh, used the banner of Christianity to promote racism, xenophobia, bigotry, and hatred. Um, so I'm not really sure what his so-called Christian message was. I joke with people all the time. Uh, as a child, I was sentenced to do 12 years in Catholic school, and I had to serve all 12. There was no probation or parole. Uh, there, there's nothing that I've heard Charlie Kirk say that if we're talking Christians, we're talking Christ-like. So I'm not sure what it is that he would say. He said this on the 19th of May, 2023. It's happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more often, end quote. Christian?
Right.
I don't find any Christianity in that statement. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Sure.
Uh, so this whole cover of Christianity is is a ruse like Zionism is relative to Judaism.
Right. I can totally see that point. And you use the word cover because we're talking about Christianity and sometimes using Christianity as a cover. Anybody else want to piggyback or have any other comments about how that is being related to Charlie Kirk being associated with a Christian message?
So they,
I'll give him the Christian. I agree with what was just said, but I will go ahead and give him the Christian title. After all, we were enslaved in the whole Americas under that regime. So I don't think he has deviated much from the regime that we have been always enslaved under. Not only enslaved, but the genocide that occurred in America and throughout the Americas, that was done under the name of Christianity as well. So, I mean, that we find it offensive that he gives himself the term Christian. I don't. I think it's simply true to form.
Wow. Very good point. Anybody else?
yeah, I would agree. They've used Christianity for 400 years to justify their oppression of Africans. And it's not the first Christian evangelist to come out and be foursquare, be racist. I mean, we know Bob Jones, Pat Robertson, Billy Sunday, just a litany of so-called Christians. And
Don't forget Jerry Falwell.
don't forget Jerry Falwell. Absolutely. So this is not a new story. It's not a new tactic. I think what makes it different is that he was assassinated in a public place by another white male, and that's what makes it different. Because normally it's only there were not. Well, we lived through King and Malcolm and Medgar, so assassinations are nothing new, and America is violent from its core. And we have to continue. We have to figure out how to live and avoid that violence.
Very good point. Thank you, Mr. Rose. And you use the term assassination, and I've heard it actually be argued, was he assassinated? Would you consider, if you look at the definition of assassination, it's someone of a in political power that is a political figure. And some people say that he wasn't assassinated, he was just shot. What do you think the public's reaction is mostly to this? Do you think people see this as an assassination, or do you think people kind of look at him as a civilian that was shot?
Well, from my perspective, yeah, he was not just a civilian. He was used politically to make sure that this current administration is back in the White House. He was far and wide, I think, victimizing young college students with his mixture, sort of an evil gumbo of Christianity and white supremacy.
Man,
Wow,
bro, you just
I think
insulted
that was
gumbo. Man.
Say it
yeah.
again.
I think that was very powerful what he just said because uh, the young people have started to change, and the particular group, the white nationalists, white supremacists, these guys know that they're all gone if these people ever. If the progressiveness of these people came out, so he was right there re-indoctrinating them into the past.
Hmm.
I'd have to say that he was assassinated. He, no question, he was a very, at least in terms of the current administration, he was a very influential uh, political operative who had a fairly a moderate size platform. And even though we haven't come, we the reasons behind the assassination are unknown, I would think it's safe to say, for the sake of this conversation, that he was assassinated, that he was shot for his political perspective. So I think that meets the criteria for assassin. Until we find out otherwise, I would have to say he was assassinated.
Got you. All right. Thank you so much for that. I know that I'm going to ask one more question. I think we're going to take a quick break, but to that end, what is it something to be said about the audience that he chose, which was mostly college campuses? Would this have worked with people that were older? And to just the overall attraction, what do you think can be said about that?
They consider the campuses as the base of the enemy. J.D. Vance has said this from various platforms at national conservatism conferences, and they quote Richard Nixon saying the universities are our enemies. And so he chose and was endorsed and funded to go try and alter that base on the campuses. It was deliberate and focused. I'm not sure, given his age, how much he would have been affected with an older generation. But he was the best candidate for their purposes for the campuses.
Okay.
I
Very
think
good.
Donald Trump has proven that the older generation is already taken care of. They are set in their ways. So you're absolutely right. It's the going in there and changing those minds that's what he was there for, and he didn't have to do that with the older folks. So they are already there.
And I also think that he was at the college campus because the Republicans are really playing the long game here, and
Right.
they see the college campuses on one side of the equation. They see them as the fertile ground for the opposition, but on the
Mm,
other side of the equation, when you're in Utah, and you're at a university in Utah, you're there speaking to kindred spirits, and so they are there to till the soil and to fertilize the minds for the long game. Those 21, 22, 23-year olds, they're hoping they are able to maintain their support when they're 40, 45, and 50.
Yep. Get him
And
in.
that's their success. And the success is that these guys have always played the long game. It took them 40 years to overturn a whole lot from the civil rights to the voting rights to 40 years they were working at it. And they've been successful at it.
wow. Very, very good point. Thank you so much, Mr. Willies. Of course, we're having a conversation with America, talking about Charlie Kirk. I'm Ebony Steele, your moderator. Hold tight. We'll be right back with more. Be back in a second, guys. Great job. I'm enjoying it.
Ebony,
Yes.
there was just I was just texted a executive order that Trump signed today to justify political repression of people who are speaking against Charlie Kirk and against the movement that call themselves anti-fascists. And they say that these are the people preparing the grounds for terrorism. And so they're looking at repression of people's free speech who are
Wow.
on our side of the political scale, explicitly targeting us.
Wow.
We are going to have to keep speaking. I mean, if we stop talking, we have to make it move. He doesn't really have the right to do it, and if we stop speaking, it's going to give it to him implicitly.
Yes, he's I think this is getting prepared for the October 8th indivisible rallies where they expect millions of people to be out opposing the Trump administration.
Yeah, agreed. The No Kings rally.
Yeah. And that's why they're calling an emergency meeting of every general and admiral.
Yeah, okay. The commercial is about to end, you guys. Ebony, we didn't introduce Russ Milan. We're getting ready to start back.
Yes, sir.
Just 1 second.
And we're back.
Okay. All right. And 3, 2. Hey, it's Ebony Steele, and I am back as we talk with America, more specifically about Charlie Kirk, having a conversation with America. And of course, our esteemed guest that we have, Dr. Lisa Hicks Gilbert, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Oh, we're just going to say Professor Lisa Hicks Gilbert. That's what I'm going to call you. You're going to be my professor, sister. We got Richard Rose and Egberto Willie, host of Politics Done Right. I'm going to jump into a question and let's talk about how this relates to the president, or how the president is relating to this. Of course, he's blaming the left as being responsible for radicalizing the shooter. I'm going to have to ask Miss Lisa, how do you feel about that?
Let me unmute myself. And I have to be honest, and as I was being asked about being on the panel, I wasn't really familiar with Charlie Kirk, but with some of the all of the rhetoric that was happening, and been overly concerned about the use of language coming from the top. And and as I think about my history and some of the worst racial violence in the history of this country that happened right here in my hometown. And a lot of that, rhetoric happened that caused the Elaine massacre, and that, it set things in motion. and, you know, blaming the left or blaming the right. I'm finding myself conflicted, you know, as I navigate these waters of being the mayor here in this community, and always making sure that my tone is, especially being the first Black mayor here, and then also being the founder of the descendants of the Elaine massacre. And so I came in with the challenge already on my back. So in reminding myself that I represent the entire town of Elaine, and then trying to set that example and have that standard, and to see the leader of our country with some of the rhetoric and what is happening, and then not taking responsibility for it has been a challenge for me here in the community. And then as I look out over the country, a challenge for all of us. And as you can tell, I'm kind of guarding my words
I see that.
here,
And
because, you know, because as an elected official, you know, there's this unspoken word of where we don't berate other elected officials, but you know, of course, you don't see that when you're watching the news. But you know, as I'm watching the leader of our country, not just the rhetoric here in our country, but then the rhetoric when he's on a national stage, it has been embarrassing. And him, you know, and he not taking the responsibility, and those around him not holding him responsible for the rhetoric and contributing to the violence that we're currently seeing in this country.
Very good point, Mayor. And just for those briefly that may not be familiar with the massacre, can you kind of explain that and just tell the debate, the back and forth with that?
Yeah.
Very controversial.
Yes, the Elaine massacre of 1919, you know, has been classified as one of the worst racial massacres in the history of this country. Happened, it began September 30th, 1919, which we're getting ready to come up on the 106th anniversary, getting ready to commemorate that anniversary next week. And here in this small community where Black sharecroppers were organizing for better wages, better pay of the crops that they had grown and were getting ready to harvest. And the powers that be, the plantation owners, and some of the local law enforcement, understanding that the crops that were coming in and the price of cotton at that time would enable these sharecroppers to become independent from them, able to purchase their own land. And the church that night in Hoopsburg, just 3 miles up the road here from Elaine, they descended upon the church and started shooting in the church. Some of the sharecroppers shot back. A white man was killed. And rhetoric and lies that were told set in motion the violence that killed upward of 1,000 Black men, women, and children. And 12 men subsequently were put on trial, 8-minute trial, and sentenced to death. And 2 of those men, Ed and Frank Hicks, were my ancestors. And you know, and then we think about the erasure of our history at this time, removing history from museums and shutting museums down. And we, you know, that's what has risen me up because it took us so long. I only learned about what had actually happened in my town, in my community, and to my ancestors when I'm in my 40s. So I'm only knowing about this for 15 years. And now here I am faced not only with, you know, the country, you know, the administration trying to erase our history, but even here in my own state, of them not allowing, you know, African-American history to be taught. And so it has put me in a place to where I can no longer be silent. And that's why, you know, I wear a t-shirt that says silent no more.
Good for you. And congratulations on being, you said, the first
Black mayor.
And you didn't mention the fact that, well, of course, that would be the first Black woman mayor.
First Black woman, female mayor, first Black mayor of the...
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you think that sometimes when you are talking about issues or racial issues, being a Black female mayor, that you have to, I guess, push double to get your point across sometimes?
Absolutely.
Right.
Not only push double to get my point across, but sometimes be the loudest, you know, voice in the room, because I find myself being pushed back. And sometimes I go into spaces where there is no chair for me. And, you know, like a wonderful, beautiful ancestors said, sometimes I have to bring a folding chair and make sure that there is space, not just for myself, but space for my community and space for the other descendants who have yet to have a voice, in certain spaces. So yes.
Well, congratulations. Thank you so much on that. Mr. Bellant,
Yes, I'm here.
why do you think it is so easy for for MAGA, for Trump, for them just to blame the left on the whole situation?
Well, I believe that largely the American population is apolitical, and the MAGA base doesn't believe that he tells open lies to them, and they don't. So there's never been they haven't done an assessment of his character, and they want to believe it because they consider themselves opponents at best, opponents of the left or of progressive politics of any sort. Of even the words democracy and justice don't, get friendly receptions in their views. So the idea that the president is waging this battle and makes something up when they haven't even identified the shooter, and he just says it off the top of his head, and they want to accept it on what I'll call faith.
Right. Wow.
But that's, I've been to countless events over the decades of theirs, and it amazes me how people will in that movement, in that world, will accept at face value the most outrageous claims. It's not just Donald Trump, but Pat Robertson and just many of them. They were always open to it, and the whole idea of dismantling public education is to incapacitate people to know what their foundations of our society is, what our true history is, and how to think for themselves.
That's a great point. I heard a thought leader say that this administration is the greatest gift to mediocrity. I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm like, okay, but
yeah. They just issued an executive order today to start active repression of
yeah,
groups.
you mentioned that.
Yeah, and political groups that he said contribute to the assassination by their rhetoric. So they call themselves anti-fascist. So these groups are going to be targeted, and we've got to see. We're going to have to fight and stand and put our voices everywhere that we can. Standing up. We've got to reach people in our own communities that are being passive right now.
Right. Very good. Thank you for that. Egberto and Richard, I'm going to ask you this because this whole thing has come down to the First Amendment right. And, I don't know if you remember, Donald Trump himself at one point joked about, the tragedy with Nancy Pelosi's husband. You had the comic who made the joke about Puerto Rico being a floating pile of junk in the ocean. When it comes to picking and choosing, what is your First Amendment right? And is there any limit to it? Or are people just cherry picking when and conveniently when to be offended?
We know when to be offended. I mean, there are rules. You can't start fire in a theater. Absent that, you can say whatever you want to say, and the fact that, and to prove that, that is what our leader has done. Our leader has not, lies were not off limits. This destroying people was not off limit. Maligning people was not off limit. There's nothing that anybody has done who have lost their jobs during this Charlie Kirk event that this president hasn't. That's a good thing about having such an evil person in charge. They have done the most evil thing anybody else has done thus far. And therefore, when you speak about he has made mediocrity okay, I think you're being pretty generous because he's below mediocre. And in being below mediocre, in being as evil as he is, and I am not saying that word. I mean, when I say evil, that is exactly what I mean. There is nothing lower than this person.
Yes.
And he has left the door open for just about anything. And if he's still standing, everybody else must.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, Donald Trump is the perfect bigot. You name a different group and he's against it. He's against black. He's against Jewish. He's against anybody of color. And so you know the drumbeat of Trump and the new Republican Party, it comes from an 1861 speech by Alexander Hamilton Stevens, the Vice President of the Confederacy. He said the foundation of the Confederacy is that the Negro is not equal to the white man, and his rightful place is subservient to the master race. They've been trying to prove that for 400 years, unsuccessfully, and many of them know better. The lady who came up with the idea to carve Stone Mountain wrote a letter to the sculptor like 1920, 1921 to say she wanted to honor the Klan because they have saved us from Negro domination. And by saying that, she meant stopping black people from voting, tearing up their businesses and limiting economic opportunities and educational opportunities. So they haven't changed. I mean, they got a new way of dealing with it. They lie, deny, deflect, and dissemble. That's the program that they're using.
Right. And if you all can remember, because some of us may be able to remember the day that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And of course, we know that Charlie Kirk has come out and made comments about the fact that King, he sees, should not, be deemed as a hero. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even think that the civil rights movement should have been signed.
That's right.
And just at this point, too, and this I'm sorry, but Ebony's going to do this just as an ode to Dr. King. If you guys remember that day, that time, or how the media reacted to that, what are your memories of that in comparison to when Charlie Kirk being assassinated?
It is shameful. I've written a whole lot about this. The media's reaction to Charlie Kirk's death is shameful because of what it has elevated. It has actually elevated him to the level of people on his part undeserving. And what they've done in elevating him is normalizing all the things that he stood for, and for everybody else, as the doctor spoke of before. I want to know it just shows you what our leadership in corporate America believes. Nobody else matters. The mere fact that they know all the words that have emanated out of this person, and they have elevated him to the status that they have elevated him to, mean that they have disregarded everybody else. And for those who follow him, for those who think of his greatness, it should tell you something about where this country is. Because the fact that you can be told, you have heard what this guy represents, as the doctor spoke of earlier, all the litany of things that he said. If you elevate that guy, it tells you that the folks sitting next to you that doesn't look like you, what you think about them. It's right. A disrespect and a dishonor.
In that question, though, I think you also have to appreciate we were in a different time as it relates to journalism and media. Walter Cronkite was a journalist. Chet Huntley, David Brinkley, they were journalists. And we could have a conversation about the role that they played in parroting the dominant narrative. We could have that conversation. But that time is different than, because with media consolidation that we see now, understanding who owns media outlets and how those media outlets are used in order to convey an imperialist narrative to the country and to the world. I think you have to factor some of that in to answering your question. You meant, if I could take just a couple other points.
Sure.
You talked about the mediocrity of Donald Trump. We can't. I don't think that we can look at this in a vacuum. Donald Trump is not the causation. Donald Trump is the culmination. And for example, I don't think you don't get Donald Trump without Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin showed you that mediocrity was chic. Sarah Palin, when she ran with John McCain, she showed you that idiocy was okay, that
Wow.
incompetence was almost admirable.
Right.
And so she, in my opinion, laid the foundation for what we see playing itself out now as the leader of the free world.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to
Very good
understand
analogy.
that Donald Trump, with all of his faults, and there are plenty of them, how does anybody bankrupt a casino and call yourself a businessman? Anyway, he's a lot of things, but he's a very effective marketeer. He is more adept at marketing as a politician than most people you would ever find.
Facts.
And he understands the language that resonates with his base.
Right.
So Rush, you made the point about they don't really see who he is. They
Mhm.
know who he is. They love who he is because he speaks to what they're about. He plays upon the when
Yeah.
he talks about Mexicans coming across the border,
Yes.
they buy that stuff because they believe that stuff.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the final point with this, they don't like Charlie Kirk for all intents and purposes. Uh, I believe, as Machiavelli said, never let a good crisis go to waste. They could give less than a damn about Charlie. In fact, Charlie Kirk was telling Donald Trump, don't send weapons to Israel.
Yes.
Charlie Kirk was telling Donald Trump,
Release Epstein's files.
Release the Epstein file.
Right.
So all of this deification of Charlie Kirk, this has more to do with Charlie Kirk's base and how they feel they can leverage this to appeal to his base than how they really feel about Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Never waste the opportunity offered by a good crisis. That's what Machiavelli told us.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting. Very interesting point. I'm going to ask Mayor Hicks Gilbert, what do we actually do when you look at everything? How should African Americans, how should we respond at this moment? Is this something that, because even look at this particular network, UIN, there's no other network like ours in the cloud that's and on the ground in the streets that's having conversations like this. And if we're pieced and apart, and how do we come together to make what the knowledge is power? So once we get the knowledge to everybody, what do we do with that power? Or do we have the power to do anything? What's the next move? Uh-oh. Maybe I was asking the mayor, but I'll ask you, Dr. Leon, what do you think is our next move?
We got to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be very, very clear, and we can't be afraid to tell the truth. And I wrote a piece. Charlie Kirk is a racist, xenophobic bigot, and I used that. That's not my opinion. I used his words to substantiate my point. So we have to be very clear. We have to be incredibly honest, and it's ironic that on April 5th, 2023, Charlie Kirk said, I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God given rights. That's a prudent deal. It's rational, end quote. To that, I say, Charlie, be careful what you pray for.
That actually gave me chills, as that is indeed how, unfortunately, his life was taken. Wow.
You know what is also interesting? We saw, I don't know how many of you actually saw the shot. I accidentally saw the shot. I saw the gruesomeness of what occurred. I find it ironic that instead of the media using what the doctor just pointed out with respect to Charlie said about what was acceptable deaths to keep the Second Amendment and the gruesomeness of that murder, I don't see how the mainstream media didn't connect that to every 4, 5, 6-year-old, every 15-year-old that got shot with an AR-15. How
Yes.
they never made that connection to say, you guys were the gruesomeness of this murder, you saw it firsthand. How come you haven't related that to what each one of your children went through in high school, in middle
Right.
school, in elementary school as they were murdered?
Great point. Great
And the
point.
mainstream media never did that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we definitely are going to continue to have more of these conversations for sure. UIN will be the network to do that. And before we move on, I would just want to ask, because we didn't talk about the reaction from Charlie Kirk's widow, the comment that she made. And there's been a lot of opinion about that. And I think the reason why it's so sensitive is because there's so many people that consider themselves Christians. And when we see others that are saying that they are Christians, but there's other pieces attached to them that may not seem so Christian-like, it gets confusing. What
Yes.
impact do you think her statement made of the forgiveness? Mr. Bellant, what do you think?
Well,
Erica?
just quickly, I think Trump's voice, Jack Posobiec's voice, and others, Steve Miller's voice, dominated, and her words were largely lost. I mean, saying forgiveness, and Trump was very explicit. I disagree with Erica. I hate my opponents.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and the truth is he got substantial applause when he said things like this. So I think, they might not even believe that she really believes it, but she's trying to convince Americans. Her history goes back to Jerry Falwell's Liberty University and
Yeah.
other places where, people who are truly forgiving don't go. But I think there's a much greater hypocrisy that when we get to further down the road about this, because if people forget, even our people forget that in 2020 Trump ordered the Secretary of Defense to start shooting George Floyd protesters. Initially, he meant kill them. And then when the secretary said no, he said, well, just shoot them in the legs.
Unbelievable.
They out of Trump world in 2024 came a book called Unhumans that said anyone who believes in fairness and equality is an unhuman that must be crushed. And in 4 chapters, they gave examples of how dictators mass murder the opposition. And this book was endorsed by J.D. Vance, Donald Trump Jr., and others in the inner circle, co-published by Steve Bannon. That really puts the nail in the coffin, so to speak. And many other things. The National Institute for Justice did a study that said that most of the political murders and political violence comes from the far right. And they said basically in a study of a 5-year period that 63% of that came from the far right. And in 2024, they said all of it came from the far right. And
Wow.
and so the Justice Department, the National Institute for Justice is the research arm of the Department of Justice. The Justice Department took it off their website. So
They
people,
pulled it down.
yeah, they
Right.
took it right down. And so, and they, I've seen other studies in the last 50 years. The study, it's always been the far right that's conducted most of the political murders and deaths. And they're factoring even in the 9/11 data, which, I wouldn't factor in because that's not, relevant to our discussion. And then the blessing, the Kyle Rittenhouse, the Lance Volter, the January 6th rioters, they killed 5 people. 5 people were killed in that, but 174 police officers were injured alone. And then you have the series of years of attacks on abortion clinics, not necessarily people who performed, but anybody who was supporting them. Oklahoma City bombing,
Right.
open
Wow.
Nazis, the
It goes
order,
on.
it goes on and on. And to bring it back to today a little more, the FBI said they were going to terminate investigations of white supremacist groups because they're not a national security problem. But Adam Waffen which is one of the Nazi, we're talking about Nazi, as in swastikas, and the base and other organizations, both of them are doing paramilitary training and have been involved in murders. And yet the FBI, under Kash Patel, under Donald Trump, really, has ended the investigations of the white supremacists who are doing it because the data shows that they're the more likely murderers than anybody else. So the whole system is hypocritically biased. And, if we're going to talk about have this national conversation, and all the media and all the commentary and the
Right.
legislation, honor with a resolution, Charlie Kirk. We haven't talked about the school children who've been killed in, just days before. We're not talking about all the political and mass murder that the right has done in this country. That doesn't rise to the occasion. It gets reported and moved on, but there's no deification of the murderers.
That's a great point, Mr. Bellant. You brought up a lot of incidents that I frankly had not forgotten about, but it's
Mhm.
more than comfortable to count. Egberto, you seem like you had something you wanted to add to that.
No, I just wanted to point out that I agree with everything that he's said there. I think going forward, what we have to make sure to do is not get hoodwinked. And I think that is what's occurring right now. We are being hoodwinked by the mainstream media, and we are being led and pulled. I think it is time for us to create our own narrative. I think it is time for us to get off the fence and not be fearful about telling the way things are. I understand if you're a professor, where you're working for the government, where others have they have control over what you're doing, your wages, etc. But for all of us who have that are not controlled by anybody else, I think it is high time that we must, in fact, act out and not let them lead the narrative. I am so happy that UIN has this platform that allows this to occur, because
Yeah.
without it is essential, because all the other platforms are censoring. I've been censored on other platforms, etc. We're not censored where it does not affect our livelihood. I think it is imperative that we actually act. And I am sorry, this was supposed. I held an hour to do this. I am so apologetic. I had to go over another meeting. I can't say how appreciative I am to run the Lust panel and get in speak our mind as we speak.
Oh, it was a pleasure having you, for sure, for sure. And this is just going to bring us to our just the very last question
Well, can I
before we
make one quick
go.
point?
Oh,
And it is quick.
sure, Dr. Leon, go ahead.
I thought Erica Kirk's performance was bad kabuki theater. When I when I saw it, it made me think immediately of Jimmy Swaggart. If you remember when he came on
Oh,
Yes,
TV,
yes, yes,
please forgive me. I
yes,
have sinned.
yes,
But
yes,
And the
yes,
Oscar goes to.
and the other point is when you cry without tears, to me, it is suspect.
yes. Very smart. Very, very exactly.
Very, very good point. We're gonna wrap up here. Definitely, we'll be back to talk. Maybe not so much this topic, but topics just like these, because that's what UIN does. Um, my last question before everybody goes: 60% of Americans get their news from satire, meaning they get it from comedians or they get it from podcasts, not just mainstream, just, as we knew it back in the day. So, how important is it to be able to protect? I know the answer may be obvious, but tell me in your own words how important it is to be able to protect these platforms so that they aren't censored and everything doesn't end up like a Jimmy Kimmel.
yes, the platforms
Together
are
we must
funded.
have each other's back.
Yes,
Together
right.
we must have each other's back.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we got to protect the funders and the programs and the people who exercise and use the programs. And I think every major rally that is occurring that's expressing opposition to what Trump is doing, we need to be there. We need to stand up. We have to show resistance. They did that with, a huge crowds for Charlie Kirk. We have to have our counterpoint manifested and visible.
And more independence and controlling your own media. I think that's
Yes,
something that we fell short on, I would say, in the last 10 years, is the
yes,
ownership of the media, and to where, when I was having a conversation yesterday, we were talking about how they sold, Ebony, and they sold, all of the BT, all of those medias that were geared toward us having a voice in, those were sold. And I think we lost a lot in that era when all of those were being taken away. And we lost so much ownership and independence.
Mhm.
I agree with that.
What we can do is continue to speak out where we can,
Mhm.
wherever we can. Silence gives consent. And
Yes.
we have to demonstrate that we do not consent to the policies of this government and this government supporters. We have to continue to, every opportunity we get to go and vote to help select our local leaders. That's what we need to do. And there's a lot of work to be done. Uh, do what we can, when we can, how we can.
I love it. All
Amen.
about. We got a long way to go, but I love that everybody could say something, at least with the note of moving forward and progressing forward. And to that end, I want to say thank you again to Mayor Hicks Gilbert, Dr. Wilmer Leon, Mr. Richard Rose, Egberto Willie. I feel like and Mr. Russ Belland. Thank you for joining us so much. On behalf of UIN, I'm Ebony Steele once again, and we will be calling you back because your word is important. Everybody hit some great points today. So thank you again, and we'll see you real soon.
And thank you, Ebony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ebony.
Great job, Ebony.
Appropriate pause. Thank you so much, everyone. That was really great. We're gonna